Story 1. The Old Man. In an old apartment building on the outskirts of the city lived a very wicked old man. He was blind, but there were rumors that he was a sorcerer and cursed anyone who looked at him. The residents of the building were terrified of him and always closed their eyes when he passed by. They had no choice since there was only one entrance in the building. One day, the old man died. No one dared to enter his apartment, not even the paramedics who came on a call. As it turned out, rumors of his supernatural powers had spread far beyond the boundaries of the building. In an emergency meeting, the residents discussed what to do. Someone suggested not to bury him at all, but simply to seal the entrance door, wrapping it tightly with thick plastic to avoid the smell of the corpse. The elderly crossed themselves, but fearing for their children and grandchildren, reluctantly agreed with the majority of the younger residents. By the end of the day, the old man's door was covered with a tight white film, and the door was nailed shut with 7 planks. The next morning, the residents were horrified to find that someone barbarically tore off the top plank. During the day, they brought a new one and nailed it in place. The next day, the story repeated itself, but now 2 top planks were missing. Despite their efforts to nail them, the number of missing planks inexorably decreased. After 7 days, no one could get out of the entrance door. It was tightly boarded up with thick planks. The residents gathered on the landing near the open door of the old man, arguing and accusing each other of what had happened. Suddenly, everyone fell silent. From the depths of the dark apartment, shuffling footsteps were heard. With eyes widened in fear, the panicked residents scattered, hiding in their apartments. To their surprise, they found that all the windows were tightly boarded up. Attempts to remove the planks were unsuccessful. The revived old man wandered through the entrance, making terrifying sounds. The residents could hear his footsteps, his breath, his laughter. They tried to hide in their apartments, but he found them, slowly and agonizingly killing them one by one. After a few days, there was not a single living person left in the building. Having accomplished his revenge, the old man calmly returned to his apartment and lay down in bed. He was satisfied with himself. The next day, the police broke down the entrance door, rushing into the building. Inside each apartment, they discovered human bodies disfigured beyond recognition. The old man, however, peacefully lay in his bed. His dead eyes were open, expressing complete satisfaction. The police could never explain what had really happened. They had never encountered anything like it before. The building was sealed for a while, but after a year, all the apartments were put up for sale again. Rumors circulate in the city that the ghost of the old man still roams the building in search of new victims. Second story. Dead Place. In the heyday of my parents' youth, they lived in a large communal apartment in the very center of Moscow, almost opposite the Kremlin, in Brodnikov Lane. My mother was 25 years old at the time, my father was 26, and my brother was just over a year old. I wasn't even in their plans yet. The apartment was of the corridor type, with numerous rooms where separate families lived. They lived harmoniously, helping each other look after the children and with household chores, sharing recipes, treating each other with pies, and even celebrating holidays together, all except one family. This family lived very closed off and isolate. A wife, an elderly, almost elderly woman, and her second husband. Her previous husband drowned in the Moscow River, although in the kitchen, women whispered that he was deliberately drowned. After burying her first husband, the neighbour, not mourning for long, remarried a young handsome man almost half her age. Women also discussed and gossiped a lot about this marriage. Some kind of mischief was constantly happening in the apartment. Every family had encountered it, and I will tell only about what my family experienced. One night, when my father was away on a business trip, my mother was awakened by the sound of little bare feet slapping against the floor. Opening her eyes, she saw her son confidently walking around the room, heading towards a huge wardrobe. My mother's first thought was worrisome. Walking barefoot on the cold floor, he might catch a cold. The second thought was, how did he manage to climb out of the crib? The crib rails were high. Meanwhile, the toddler, reaching the wardrobe, disappeared behind it. Mom, leaping out of bed, swiftly moved the massive piece of furniture away from the wall and grabbed her son with both palms. Only her palms passed through emptiness, clapping against each other with a hollow sound. At the sound, my mother seemed to snap out of a trance. She stood by the wall behind the wardrobe, trying to catch someone in the darkness. And only at that moment did she realize that her son was not yet able to walk independently. Rushing to the crib, she saw the peacefully sleeping child. The next night, her son's footsteps woke her again. Opening her eyes, she saw him briskly marching around the round table in the middle of the room. She lay there and watched as the child completed the second circle. The absurdity of the situation began to pull her out of her stupor. On the third circle, she clicked a floor lamp switch. The light illuminated the empty room. On the following night, the young man, the husband of the strange neighbour, hanged himself. He was found early in the morning hanging in the kitchen. He was dressed in a fashionable, expensive sweater, a birthday gift from his wife the day before. The kitchen floor was covered with a layer of cigarette butts that he smoked that night. After the funeral of her husband, this woman became very ill and eventually passed away after some time. But the cursed apartment's residents found no peace. After some time, neighbours started noticing the reflection of the deceased woman in the glass of sideboards, buffets, and bookshelves. My parents removed all the glass from the furniture, wrapped them in newspapers, and stowed them away. Others had to do the same. After a while, residents stopped going to the kitchen at night because the hanging neighbour started appearing there after midnight. He sat on a stool, holding his head in his hands, swaying from side to side. This is far from all the horrifying incidents. A whole lot more happened in the cursed apartment. My parents had to endure all this devilry for 10 years until they received a new apartment on the outskirts of Moscow and moved there. By the way, all the children who lived in that cursed place were stutterers. My brother outgrew this ailment with age, but still, when agitated, he starts stuttering again.